All right, this is working. I'm going to enthrall you with my resume talk. As G mentioned, I'm a recruiter at Lookahead, so I spend my day looking at resumes. Before then, I worked at companies like Canva and Dropbox. I was actually on Dropbox's landing team when they first opened their international office in Dublin. So I was a hiring manager there and spent a lot of time hiring people and looking at resumes there as well. So that's a little bit about my background. Sorry, covered that. Just a disclaimer, so everything that I'm sharing today is personal opinion. It's subjective. It's collected from feedback from the people that I work with at Lookahead and also hiring managers that I work with. Ultimately, your resume is yours. It's very personal. If you don't feel comfortable with the advice here, obviously you don't have to take it. It's mostly provided here as best practices for your information. So to start things off, who here is a hiring manager or has to look at resumes for hiring purposes? Yes, Zara? Yes, I see hesitant hands. And keep your hand up if you actually enjoy doing that. Okay, literally. So if you look around, anyone who's looking for a new job or is thinking about looking for a new job, this is what you're up against. No one likes it. It's depressing. And this is what I feel like at the end of the day, if I'm looking at walls and walls of resumes with tons of text, can't decipher any of the valuable information. Yes? Oh, sorry. I'm not used to speaking with a mic. Yeah, it can be depressing. So the purpose of this talk is to help you, give you guys some advice on how to craft your resume to really get your first interview. We're going to cover two topics. The first is content, so what are the kind of juicy pieces of information that you need to include in your resume? And the second one is actually how to present it. What should it look like? So to start things off, it's a common confusion between, people don't often understand that there's a distinction between a resume and a CV. Does anyone here actually know the difference between the two? Because we use them pretty interchangeably. So essentially a resume is a really brief summation of your professional history. It's usually tailored for the role that you're applying for. You don't need to include everything. Whereas a CV is literally a complete aggregate of your professional background, your academic background, papers you've published, everything that you've done in your professional career. CVs can be incredibly long. I mean, I've seen 20, 25 pages. A resume really should be quite short. So to break it down, obviously your work experience is one of the most important things you need to put on your resume. I've put some examples up here. So some clear, consistent formatting. I know what your title is. I know where you worked. City can be helpful, especially if you're moving from abroad or your experiences from abroad. A date, and then a meaningful description. Tell me about what you did there. Tell me something that's really interesting about the impact that you delivered on your team. In the second example, I've included the word contract. Sometimes this can be useful if you're someone who's done a lot of contract roles. This can be quite valuable because you don't want to have a hiring manager look at all these projects you've done and thinking that you've jumped from one permanent role to the next. So clarifying that you've done contracts can be really useful. Don'ts. Do not exceed 3 pages. Obviously, that's very Australia specific. If you're working in the UK or the US, it might be a little bit different. But in Australia, do not make it more than 3 pages. No one's going to look beyond that. 1 to 2 is ideal, and that's if you have 1 year of experience or 20 years of experience. Definitely summarize old experience. So anything older than 10 years, just group them together and ditch anything that's irrelevant. We don't need to know that 10 years ago you worked as a barista, as you were trying to break into your dev career. Not important. Experience isn't a list of tasks. Sometimes people say, like, this is what I did every single day. Focus on outcomes and achievements. How did you improve performance of the app? Or did you do a significant rebuild or contribute to a new feature? These are things that hiring managers care about. Also, don't separate projects from roles. Sometimes I look at resumes and people outline their projects in the beginning, and then they have a whole new section of every job they had and then reiterate those projects again. It's just really quite confusing and not necessary. Education dues. So yeah, pretty clear and simple. Put your relevant education there. Sometimes people like to include a bunch of information about thesis and research and stuff like that. It's not necessary unless there's something particularly interesting that you've done that's relevant to the job that you're applying for. If you're a graduate of a boot camp, yeah, be proud of that. Put that on there. Talk about relevant courses and topics you've done there. Education don'ts. High school and primary information, so not important. I don't care where you went to junior high or primary school, I guess, in Australia. And no one cares about every class you took in uni. Like, the academic classes you took has no correlation to your success on the job. Unless you just graduated, GPA isn't important. And especially if you're overseas, if I look at a GPA, I actually have no idea what that GPA means in Australia. It might be a little bit different if you're applying to like a graduate rotational program where GPA may be important. Definitely include that on there. And also leave miscellaneous certifications out. Yeah, a lot of people like to include like a bunch of enterprise-y, corporate-y certs that I actually have no idea what they mean. And again, tells me that you know how to maybe take an exam, but doesn't tell me that you know how to work in a team or deliver product. Projects, definitely include them. If you have open source work, definitely include the links to your GitHub. If you're a big contributor on Stack Overflow, include that information as well. Hiring managers love that. Do not include links that don't work. If I click on something and your website is down, I'm not going to be very impressed. Don't link to zips or other downloads. I don't have time to install your apps. No, neither does the hiring manager. Make the projects meaningful and be prepared to discuss them. I've definitely had conversations where I've asked about what I thought were interesting projects and people were not able to clearly articulate what the project was. Also a little bit disappointing. And also, lastly, most importantly, don't stress if you don't have side projects. Sometimes people are busy, they don't have time to really contribute to open source community. That's all right, it's not going to exclude you, but if you do have them, that's great. Technical skills, keep it short and sweet, keep it relevant to the role. A lot of mobile developers have switched over from web development careers. You can include some of the web stuff, sometimes that's useful, but really try to keep it mobile focused. This is just a suggestion. I've separated them into strong and knowledgeable to make that distinction between where you're feeling like you have expertise and areas where maybe you can discuss at length a certain topic, but you're maybe don't have commercial experience. So keep it relevant, don't be redundant. You're expected as a developer, I hope that you know how to use a computer. Don't tell me that you have mastery of email and Microsoft Office. These things are not very useful. This is my really strong personal opinion, but I don't think progress bars are very useful. They're really arbitrary. I don't know what like full blue means or like sort of down here, not quite filled in. It feels very random to me. Here's an example of a really simple header: name, title, website, GitHub link, city, email, phone number, things we don't need to see. We don't need to see your photo, your full name, age, marital status, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, driver's license, etc., etc. This is all really personal information and you do not need to include them in a resume. Hobbies I've put in there because if there's amazing hobbies that you have or personal achievements that you want to stick in there, feel free. You don't have to include them. The other thing I forgot to mention specifically up here is references. So our advice to candidates is don't include your references. If your resume is floating around on Seek, you just don't want people contacting references without your knowledge. When you engage in an interview process, if the person you're working with knows what they're doing, they'll let you know when you get to reference check stage. So, part 2. This is what resumes sometimes look like to me, and we're blinded by a wall of text. Lots of buzzwords, just filling up the whole page. This is not doing you any good. White space is your friend. Keep it tidy. I totally get it. I'm not a designer. I rely on things like Canva conveniently or Google Docs templates. That's perfectly okay. It's fine to rely on free templates that are out there. Make use of them. They can be really useful. and be tasteful. This is not an art project. Don't put a million colors on there. One of my pet peeves is seeing a bunch of logos on there. That's not really helping do justice to the content. Just keep it really clean and simple. And last but not least, be truthful. I cannot emphasize how important it is to be honest in your resume. Do not include every technology you've ever read about but didn't actually use. I can assure you, if it doesn't come out at stage 1 of the interview process, it'll be really clear after you get the job or at some point. And honestly, the tech community in Australia is really, really small, and word travels and reputation is super important. So just be honest and upfront. And these are my resources. I'm happy to share this around. A lot of this content I took from a really amazing Medium article. Maybe take a shot of it, but also happy to circulate this later because this guy definitely had opinionated guide to writing developer resumes, and I agreed with a lot of the content, and it's stuff that we run into every day. So hope that was helpful.